Our next speaker, I'm super happy to have her come down from the Flathead. Yeah, this is, in fact, this person I tried to introduce before, but I was wrong. But this is Dr. Sara Boilen, and she's a clinical psychologist out of the Flathead. What's the name of your thing? Sweetgrass Psychological Services. She says, oh, I'm a casual mountain athlete, enjoys skiing, mountain climbing, trail running, and eating treats on peaks with friends. But Sarah's so much more than this. Sara knows us because she's one of us. And so she has wonderful advice and insight into things that we as a professional community need to hear about difficult things. She reached out to me at the Avalanche Review a couple years ago when we were having a spate of fatalities and wrote this incredible, fabulous, really touching letter that I was really honored to share with all of you. And so on that note, it's a great honor to introduce Sara Boilen.
Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about you all, which can be kind of a sensitive topic, but I'm going to make it fun and totally comfortable, I swear. So, what do you think? There we go. So this is sort of our overview for what I'm going to talk about, just so you know what we're going to be doing. And I want to start by just kind of talking about all the ways it's hard to be an avalanche professional. So raise your hand if you are a guide of some kind. Okay, just so I have an idea. What about a forecaster of any kind? Patrol? Okay, search and rescue? Okay, so we're going to cover all that. Anyone I forgot, overlooked? You're all included. Everyone's welcome here. And I hope that you all walk away with something helpful. That's the goal. Oops, back. Okay, so first we're going to start with burnout. And hopefully this is something you're not familiar with, but it is definitely possible that you are. So burnout is a pretty well-defined concept. It is this certain kind of energy depletion that's also accompanied by this feeling of like hating humans or hating your work, and then also feeling either bad at your job or feeling disinterested in your work. Has anybody ever? Yeah, okay. This half of the room should all switch sides because that's half as good. So me too, right? And you all do some really hard work, so it makes sense to me that you would feel some burnout from time to time. And so here are just some of the things that like contribute to burnout. And I thought it was really interesting when I was compiling this. I was like, you're basically defining like y'all's world, right? Is like often you're out there by yourself, or you have a really difficult time having a work-life balance. Anyone in the room in the winter traditionally get up before 5 a.m.? How about 4 a.m.? Okay, I'm sorry. And how many of you go to bed before 9 p.m.? Awesome, okay, good to hear. So being a winter, professional is tough, right? We start our days really early, and usually they are long and stressful. And that's just like one contributing factor. Also, this lack of control, right? So a lot of times you are dealing with things that are beyond your control, right? Whether that's like work-related or job-related. Work meaning like the actual work you do, and job meaning your boss and how terrible they are, or awesome. I'm a boss, so I don't want to hate on them too much. Okay, so that's burnout. We're now going to talk about trauma. And we're also going to talk about stress injury. Hopefully some of this is not new to you, but I still think it's really important for us to have like a common language that we're using. So what is trauma? So we often think of like trauma as this thing that happens to us, this outside experience, but trauma is actually our internal response to the thing that happened to us. And so two people can be involved in the same incident, and one walks away experiencing trauma and one does not. right? And trauma is simply stated when our internal or external resources get overwhelmed by the situation that we are expected to cope with. And so you can kind of see that like the harder our life feels, the more tired we are, the more likely we are to experience something as trauma rather than on those days when we're solid, like we're well rested, we're feeling great. We might be able to have some things bounce off of us. Additionally, past trauma is the most likely predictor of future trauma happening, as well as being sensitive. So stress injury, this is a common term now in this profession, which is really exciting to me. Not exciting that we all have stress injury, but at least that we know about it. And stress injury is actually not like easily defined, but essentially we can think of it as like this overtime accumulation that feels kind of below the level of trauma, but still causes us distress. And so like if stress injury is like a, pull of your ACL, like a trauma would be like a full tear of your ACL, right? And stress injury, again, like trauma, it accumulates. And we know that our stress is directly tied to like all the things that are piling on us. Anybody feeling like, I am hearing myself in any of this? Yeah. And I think we all do, right? I'm a psychologist. I help people for a living. I feel this too. And it can be really exhausting. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this. There's actually one that's directly applicable to this profession. There's a really great article in the TAR that's probably sitting on your coffee table right now about this concept. And I think it's really helpful if we all just take a moment and try to figure out where we are right now. And hopefully you can all read it. And we've instituted a thing at my work where when we start a meeting, we just check in and say what color we are that day. We sort of have this rule and expectation that you don't have to like say why you are what you are that day. You just get to kind of name it. And it's helpful when you're working in a team because you kind of know where everybody's standing. So if there are people who are like, wow, our whole team is orange right now. Like, we should do something about that. Or wow, like, we're all feeling pretty good. Or wow, this one person has been yellow, like, every day for the last month. Maybe it's worth checking in with them. And then knowing that about yourself. So having, like, a regular practice of just feeling like, how am I doing? Like, what's been going on for me? And where am I in these things? And I love that it's like, there are some concrete things. And for me, like a big one is feeling trapped. And actually the gold is actually orange, which is now pronounced, orange, I forget. And like feeling trapped is a really big one for me. That's like a real warning sign. And I've started to be able to identify that and then be like, whoa, Boilen, you gotta like figure out what to do about it. Okay, so this is my aunt's dog, Nina. Isn't she adorable? And aren't dogs better than people in so many ways? Yes, the answer is yes. So I'm going to talk about just a couple ways that humans are terrible. Tomorrow, if you come back, you're going to hear me talk a lot about how humans are terrible, mostly at making choices that are good. But this influences you as well, especially those involved in search and rescue, guiding, ski patrol, all these things. You are dealing with humans who are not necessarily thinking about you and your stress injury. And they're not necessarily even thinking about what they should be doing that day. They are just out there. You can be a guide and tell a person exactly where to ski, and sometimes they're going to ski a little bit to the left. I guarantee it. Yes? And one of the things that Lynn and I talked about when I wrote that open letter is I think there's a tendency in any human to look for explanations to things that happened that were bad. And so let's say it was a moderate day and there was an avalanche incident involving humans. Suddenly people are at the bar saying like, I don't know why it was moderate. It's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't blame the forecaster, right? But that's what we do. We like look for a place to pin things. And then if you're that professional, you are pin the tail on the donkey. Like they're pinning it on you. And thinking about like, how do we create that barrier to recognize like, this is not me. I'm not taking this home. So it's common in our work to feel responsibility and to feel like we did something wrong, or we really, need to get on this, whatever it is. And I want to just be really clear, like it's actually not your fault. Like that thing that you're holding on to, that thing that you are convinced like you did wrong, I promise it is like actually not your fault. I'm just going to let that hang in the air for a second. Okay, so moving on. How we cope. Is this familiar? Do you all know what this is? Okay, so one of the things that I have learned over the years is that in elementary school, where you're learning like how to pass the scissors appropriately, you are definitely not learning what emotions are or like anything actually useful, right? You're like, cool, geometry, but like, how do I not freak out, right? And like, we're just not teaching that. And so if you don't have any idea how to cope other than beer, like you are not alone. And we're gonna spend kind of the rest of the time talking about how we might do that a little bit better. So for the next 10 minutes, you are receiving one free therapy session. You're welcome. Yeah, right? Because therapy is actually really expensive and health insurance is terrible. Like it really is. So we're gonna spend some time. So everybody, let's see. How about we stand up because you've been sitting for a little while. Let's do that. Thank you for listening. That was just like seeing how powerful I am. You can sit down. Just kidding. We're gonna stand up for a minute and we're gonna practice a few kind of like coping strategies right now. So there are two ways of coping. One is sort of like preventative and one is like after the fact. And most of us have like a good list of things that we do to stay well, and probably most of them include something physical, right? What happens if you break your femur? You are screwed, right? From a psychological standpoint, also physically, because that's really terrible. So don't do that. But and then many of us do not have any sort of abilities to cope like after the fact, other than alcohol, right? Because that's what we do as a culture. And so I'm going to teach you a few things you can do after the fact. These work if you are just getting off a search and rescue that was really stressful. They also work if you're a partner and you are having a fight or if you cannot sleep. Free therapy. Okay, so for the next 12 seconds, we are going to say out loud. Let me hear out loud. Out loud. Thank you. We're going to use our out loud voices and name every color we see. Ready, go. Red. Teal, black, red, green, black, red, gray, dark red, maroon, light red, and stop. Anybody want to share what they noticed while they were doing that? What'd you say?
That was all I noticed.
That was all you noticed, were the colors? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Awesome, right? It brought you into the moment. Anybody else?
It brought me externally because I was looking around.
Yes.
And
Right. And like sometimes what we're thinking about is like not really fun, right? And so when we think externally, when we focus on the outside world, we are like brought out of our ruminations or like our over and over thoughts, and we're brought into our environment. And often it's like the only thing we can think about. Not all of these are going to work for everyone. I'm going to now give you one that I hate, but sometimes it works for people. So we're going to find a rectangle. You can also use a mountain for this. And we are going to, on the upswing, as we trace with our eyes, we're going to inhale. On the over, we are going to exhale, inhale, exhale. If you're outside and there's a mountain because you don't live in the Flathead Valley and you can actually see things because it's not gray all the time, you could trace a mountain uphill, or inhale and exhale. So we're just going to try that for a second. You can do that all the time, anywhere. No one will even know you're doing it, right? The colors you can do in your head also. So this one does not work for me because I can just be like, the whole time. Like it doesn't settle me down at all, but I hear that it works for a lot of people. So try it if you will. Okay, and the last one is for all the math geeks in the room. We know Zach Miller's in that team. Anybody else math geek? Okay, so you're going to count backwards from 100 by sevens. Ready? Out loud. Ready? Go. 93. Some of you like gave up immediately. Yeah. Okay, so like I said, not everything's gonna work for everyone, but I do find laying in bed at night, if you do this one, like you can do it in your head, you can do it in the dark, and it's a helpful one. You may sit. Thank you for playing. So now you have 3 strategies. Everybody take out your phone or your notebook that you brought if you're like that person. Okay. This is called my 5, 5, 2, and 1. I do it with every client during our first or second session. 5 things you can do to stay well. 5 things you can do when you are not well. 2 people you can call, and 1 thing you can remind yourself of. You can take a picture and do this later. You can work on it right now. 1 thing I'm going to say, these cannot be like whiskey, beer, wine, vodka, like that doesn't, drinking can be 1, okay? Because drinking is a helpful coping skill if you're into that, right? But it can't be like our only coping skill. The same way like I have 1 physical activity, but I didn't write skiing, running, because if I do something bad to my body, those are no longer available, right? Anybody have any they want to shout out from either the left or right columns? Slackline? Yeah. Love that idea.
Murder mysteries.
Murder mysteries, I'm with you, and I will lend you any book anytime. There was somebody. Guitar, awesome. So I've heard like gardening, right? Out with friends, movie watching, like Netflix, right? So all of those are strategies that you may use to help yourself stay well. And then these are the things like what we just practiced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Don't do it with a mask on, because like the smell part is really gross. So, but this is a really good one for if you need some grounding, you're like kind of freaking out, you can just do that. You can also take a moment to describe an object you see, like it's a water bottle, it's teal, it says Yeti, it has a black top, anything to like bring your attention elsewhere. Serial 7s is the one you all loved, counting backwards. And then I love counting to 27 because I can count to 10 and still be real pissed. 27 like takes a little bit more energy for me. And then this is mine, you got this? That's like what I hear in my head whenever I'm having a hard time. Oops, that was the thing. Yeah, I'll try. I always get it wrong. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Make sure your teeth are brushed before you do it. I put this up here, 1, because I wanted to give a shout out to the snowmobilers in the crew, and 2, because I really wanted to help us sort of start to identify, like, what are those warning signs? So, like, when do you know that you are not at your best? And I think this is really important to, like, make note of and to have this conversation with your friends or your partners or your teammates. So, like, what does it look like if, right? Okay, so, like, I don't even know where I'm pointing this thing. Okay, so supporting each other. So this is kind of the last piece is like, okay, so like how do we do this amongst a group? And one of the biggest questions I get asked when I teach these mental health presentations is like, how do I talk to other people? So I think somebody's struggling. I can't believe nobody laughed at my really clever pun. Noted. And so I'm going to teach you how to be a good listener in 1 minute. So stay curious and don't go to advice giving. Those are the 2 biggest take-homes. So asking questions. And I think it's really important to know that if you're really worried about something, like somebody like you're worried they're suicidal, you are not going to implant an idea about suicide. If they're suicidal, they've already had that thought. And if they're not suicidal, they're not going to be like, great idea. That's just not how we work. And so it's okay to ask any question, and you can always give a disclaimer of like, hey, I want to ask you a question. This might be like kind of sensitive, or maybe this is uncomfortable, and you don't have to answer. And then I want to just give you these 2 questions that you can always ask, which is how can I meet your needs right now, or how can I show up for you right now? And would you like a hug, for me to just listen, or do you want my great advice, right? You can always ask people if you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I'm a psychologist. I've been a psychologist for 15 years, and I still like have no idea what to say to people. And so I wrote this just as much for me as for you all. I really love dogs. They're on my list for sure. What happened? Okay, so building community. So you are all in your community right here. Like a lot of you are sitting together. A lot of you came with members from your team. And so how do we change the culture as a community that has historically like not done a great job taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other? And I'm going to encourage everyone here to like think about what you took from this and like share it with somebody this week, right? It doesn't have to be a bold move. It doesn't have to be something like earth-shattering, but just be like, hey, I learned how to count backwards from 100 and I'm bad at it, or whatever it is. I don't know where my time is. Maybe I did bad. Are we good?
You can have as much time as you want.
Thanks. Free therapy. So I guess we'll entertain some discussion or questions. Oh, thanks.
On the 5, 5, 2, and 1, could you repeat what the 5 were? Activities, and the other 5 were?
So it's things that, so the 5, 5, 2, and 1 is 5 is things you can do to stay well. So these are like the staying on top of your mental health. And the second 5 is things you can do when you are not well to get back to well.
Hold on to that.
This is less of a question, but more of a question. My name's Sara. I work for the Red Psyche Foundation, and that is a newer resource in Wyoming. It's been around in Idaho for several years. We offer counseling sessions, fairly expensive, so 8 counseling sessions for people who are in crisis, for guides here. For guides.
Can you talk into the speaker so we can record you?
Yes! Community. That was
Okay,
great.
now I have to go again. Yeah, my name is Sarah. I'm from the Red Side Foundation. We've just moved into the state of Wyoming, and we are a resource that helps guides. We're specific to the guiding industry. We offer counseling sessions, up to 8 sessions. So as you're saying, therapy is expensive. We offer grants for continuing education, so that covers certs that you need for guiding. And we have resources on our website. So if you want more information, come up and talk to me. I'm upstairs.
Thanks, Sarah. That's awesome.
Who's next?
Come on, you asked everybody else questions. Yeah.
Share with us your professional, just riff on the idea. Riff on us your professional opinion on the idea that anxiety is bad, but that attentiveness is what keeps us alive.
Yeah.
There's a run with that.
I love this. So just yesterday, my friend Katie and I drove down from the Flathead Valley. We had a lot of time to talk about all the things, and I was saying how I don't really get anxious about public speaking, and I was like, I don't really get anxious about anything, and I actually feel like I could use a little anxiety in my life. Like maybe I would make better choices in general. I think often our issue is the story we tell ourselves about our anxiety. So if we tell ourselves a story that we need to get rid of our anxiety, it's not the anxiety that becomes the problem. It's the fact that we can't get rid of it that becomes the problem. So there's this model of like acceptance of like, oh, there you are, anxiety. Thanks for coming. And like thinking about like how it could be useful, or is it a message? Like there's some evolutionary psychologists who believe that all of our emotions have advantageous purposes in keeping us alive. And so anxiety, which is kind of rooted in fear, is really helpful. And you know, I always teach in AVI 1 and AVI 2 courses, like, don't trust your intuition unless it's saying no, right? And so I think our anxiety is really useful, but we've been taught as a society, like, try and get rid of it. And I think actually that's the problem. Yeah.
Jed, check the box in the back.
Just throw it like this and see what happens.
I was wondering if you could share with us your experiences or feedback on EMDR and healing from trauma, if you had any experience with that.
I think EMDR is phenomenal. I also think if you're located in the state of Colorado or Oregon, psychedelic drugs are incredible, particularly with their relevance to treating trauma. EMDR is a really cool therapy. It's this eye movement thing. You move your eyes back and forth while recounting your trauma, and you reprocess it. It's the weird theory. And you're like, that sounds like witchiness, and it totally is, and it totally works. And the great thing about it is that it can be done in 8 sessions or less with a competent therapist. So it's a really great way to sort of target these symptoms.
Going off your comment about the psychedelics, any input on ketamine treatments on PTSD?
Yeah, so ketamine and trauma seems to be very, very promising. Ketamine is what do you say? Like, yeah, it like numbs you out, right? And so if you are overwhelmed, it's a really great way to help you be less overwhelmed, done in a proper capacity. You always need really great mental health care kind of before, after, and during. So don't just go like do ketamine and be like, Dr. Boilen told me to. That's not what I'm saying. But thank you.
Hi, my name is Liz. I'm new to this community from the San Juans.
Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. I think a lot of times when we're encountering trauma or you're seeing someone encounter trauma and you want to reach out, it's easy to offer help. It actually gives us like a little serotonin boost to gift give. And so it's kind of that same part of your mind that's like, I want to offer you a space. Like, come live with me for a while, get back on your feet. How can I help you with your work or whatever it is? Like, let's get out, things like that. And I think it's a lot harder in our community to receive that or to accept help. And so I'm in this position of like really needing to learn to accept help in my life right now. And I think if we kind of reframe that and remember that the people who are offering, it makes them happy to be able to offer to help you out in any capacity, like whether it's a living space or like let's get out for a ski tour and like shake it off. And so shifting that from like I don't want to burden people to accepting that help and knowing it actually makes your community happy to do that.
Yeah, and I would also add, I have a dear friend who's going through a really hard time right now, and she's not great at asking for help or receiving help, and it actually makes me feel awful to not be able to help. And so like, it's actually like the opposite even. Like if it's not just like a boost if you let them help, but actually people feel terrible when they can't help, so let it in. And I think you're right, like we do a very bad job, particularly in this community, of receiving help and care. And the more we can shift that, I think the better. And you all did that just by showing up for this and not standing in the room out there instead. So thank you.
Thank you.
What needs to do with it?